How is the Taliban different? And I know interrelated, but how is it different from Al Qaeda and ISIS?
This is a great question. It's not redundant at all. I'm super happy that you posed that. Um, okay, so you've got obviously many extremist organizations, but we're going to focus on the three here. Those are probably the three most well known to an American audience. Um, you have, let's start with the Taliban. The Taliban is, right, subscribes to a certain branch of fundamentalist Islam. It's Sunni Islam. There are two main branches of Islam, the Sunnis and the Shia. The majority of the Muslim world is dominated by Sunnis. A minority is Shia. The biggest Shia country is Iran, and and then the majority of the Muslim world is Sunni, and so all of these groups are Sunni. Um, the Taliban adds a flare of Afghan nationalism to it. Is the Taliban is distinctly Afghanistan needs to be ruled by an Afghan Muslim. You know, that's a main thing. The Taliban is not the Taliban doesn't seek to kind of branch out into other countries and launch terror attacks in other countries in the United States, in the West, or anything. That's not part of the Taliban's goal here. The Taliban is their goal is to return Afghanistan specifically to Islamic rule. Okay, so let's branch over to Al Qaeda. Al Qaeda is not interested in state building like um, the Taliban is, and ISIS. We'll get to that. It's not centered in a country. It's a network basically. They've got cells all over the place. The 9/11 attacks were planned by a group that's known by U.S. intelligence agencies as the Hamburg Cell, because there was a group of students in Hamburg, Germany, who planned it. So there's that's a clear difference in the Taliban, is that there's groups all around the world that come together. Al Qaeda comes out of the Mujahideen in this just kind of a similar way as the Taliban did. And there's some people who would argue that the CIA or the United States inadvertently created Al Qaeda, with the implication that we did 9/11 to ourselves. Basically, it was blowback is the CIA term there. I don't think that we have enough evidence to conclude that, but there's pictures of a bunch of Mujahideen leaders in the Oval Office with Ronald Reagan from the 1980s. So there's connections. Osama bin Laden was in Afghanistan fighting with the Mujahideen in the 1980s. But yeah, so Al Qaeda is not interested in the state. It's interested in ridding the Middle East from U.S. Or U.S. presence, Western presence, not just the Middle East, the Muslim world at large. And their goals are not as clear as they once was, because if one of the goals of the war on terror was to counteract terrorism, was to get rid of Al Qaeda, and that has largely been successful. Al Qaeda is not in the same shape as it was 20 years ago. So that's Al Qaeda. Moving on to ISIS. ISIS is distinct in the form that you look at its name. The Islamic State. ISIS is the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. They rebranded themselves to be the Islamic State. So right in its very name, you get kind of a clue as to what their group's ideology is. ISIS wants to create a Islamic State that's distinct. It's the return of the Caliphate, which is another brand or version of kind of basically an Islamic monarchy almost. It's a organization or a political organization headed by a caliph. which is kind of like a king, but also the religious center. I mean, it's almost, I think a more apt comparison would be um, almost like how the Pope in the Middle Ages was not just the leader of the Catholic Church, he was in control of territory, like actual geographic territory, um, and um, and so that's a caliph is not only in charge of Islamic religious organization inside his territory, but also the actual ordering of the territory itself. And so ISIS shows up. ISIS is a branch. It comes from Al-Qaeda, an organization called Al-Qaeda in Iraq. Um, it's later disavowed by Al-Qaeda because it's too violent, too extreme, which is interesting there. So there's a dissimilarity. The Al-Qaeda leadership and ISIS leadership disagree on what are appropriate targets, what are appropriate conduct in conducting violent attacks. But ISIS, they kind of reached their height 2015, 2016. They control about half of Syria and half of Iraq. It's a huge territory that ISIS is in direct control of. And of course, you see that's when the beheading videos come out. Journalists, James Foley is beheaded on camera. Steven Sotloff is beheaded on camera. A few others are. These brutal propaganda tools are used by ISIS to really kind of bring attention to themselves. And at the same time, they are interested in state building. They're going around, they are governing cities, they are governing districts, they're going around making sure that trash is being picked up, policing, they're doing, managing healthcare and all this other stuff. So there's a distinction there. It's different from the Taliban in the sense that Taliban are Afghan nationalists. ISIS, they're not Iraqi nationalists or Syrian nationalists or anything like that. There's just a call to an Islamic territory. So those are the main differences between those three groups.